Hey everybody, we're here with another EKG practice test. To learn more about these rhythms, check out the EKG playlist. We have a lot of foundational videos there, so it's a lot of fun. At the same time, if you want to have some input on future videos, go ahead and join the Discord. It's going to be in the description below. But with that being said, everyone, here's our first rhythm, and I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 15 seconds, and then afterwards we're going to go ahead and talk about it, okay? Okay, so if we take a look at this rhythm, the first thing that we want to do is go through our rules of interpretation. So we want to go ahead and say, hey, okay, is there a P wave? And we can see that it's flattened right here. We don't see an obvious P wave. We do see a T wave and a QRS complex, so that's good at least. Now we're already kind of moving our heads towards, okay, this is probably a junctional rhythm, right? The next thing we want to look at is our QRS complex. You can see that it's nice and tight. It's less than 0.12 seconds because it's less than 3 white boxes. That's good. The next thing that we want to make sure is we can't really check the PR interval. The QRS complexes match up with the QRS complexes, so that's good. There's no indication that there's no pulse, so that's also good. So the next thing we want to do is we want to think, okay, this is a type of junctional rhythm, but what type of junctional rhythm is this? So let's go ahead and find a line that matches up with a red line here. We can see one right here. If we count our boxes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6.2 boxes. So if we take our phone calculator or whatever calculator you have, I'm going to pull mine out and take 300 divided by 6.2, which is going to give us a heart rate at 48 beats per minute, or approximately 48 beats per minute. That's going to fall into the category of being a junctional rhythm. So it's a junctional rhythm. The next one here, it's a really easy one, but I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 15 seconds anyway, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay, so if we take a look at this rhythm here, it's not really consistent with any sustainable rhythm. So we'd always check a pulse, of course. This rhythm would be considered a systole, right? We can't see an obvious P wave. We can't see an obvious QRS complex. We really want to ask like how long the patient's been down for. We always want to check a pulse, make sure that our pads are on properly. But this type of rhythm is a non-shockable rhythm, right? So we want to keep working our code, our CPR call. That doesn't mean that the patient is always going to die. Sometimes you can revive somebody with a systole, but usually the chances of reviving someone isn't as high as a shockable rhythm. But we would still work these calls. So with that being said, here's our next rhythm. I'll give you 15 seconds. So again, we're going to take a look at this rhythm and we're going to see, okay, are there any P waves? So we can see a P wave obviously right here. There's only one P wave, so that's good, and it's upright. We like to see that. It's going to be less than 0.2 seconds, which is also a good sign because it's less than one big red box. If we look right here to here, that's about 0.16 seconds, which is good. We want it to be less than 0.2. The next thing we want to check is our QRS complex. It's nice and tight. It's less than 0.12 seconds or less than 3 white boxes. The P waves match with the P waves. The QRS complexes match with the QRS complex. And the P and the QRS complexes match up with each other. So we're going to think that this is a sinus rhythm at this time. The next thing that we want to do, though, is we want to find out what our heart rate is. Is it a sinus rhythm? Is it sinus bradycardia? Is it sinus tachycardia? So we're going to look for a line that matches up with the R wave. We can see one right here. We're going to look at the next R wave. So if we count the boxes here, it's going to be 1 box, 2, about 2.6 boxes. So if we take 300 divided by 2.6, that's going to give us a heart rate of approximately 115 to 116 beats per minute. That is going to be in line with a rhythm that's sinus tachycardia, or between a heart rate of 100 to 149 beats per minute. Some text it says 100 to 150 beats per minute. So here's our next rhythm. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 15 seconds. Okay, so if we look at this rhythm, it's a little wonky, right? So the first thing we want to check is how many P waves are there. There's one P wave. They look like they're upright in each rhythm, but there's this weird abnormal spacing. You can see that there's a T wave obvious here in each of the rhythms as well, or each of the beats. We can look at our QRS complex and see that we have it nice and tight. It's less than 0.12 seconds, but the P waves aren't really matching up with the P waves. The PR interval looks good though. The P waves will be sometimes oddly spaced out with each other, but they do match up with the QRS complexes. The QRS complexes don't match up with each other also. So what type of rhythm is this going to be considered? Well, in my personal opinion, this would be a sinus arrhythmia or just an abnormal rhythm, right? We can't really get a good heart rate going, but the P wave looks good. The QRS complex is nice and tight. There's only one P wave. It's upright as well. So that's whenever we kind of consider, okay, is this kind of like a sinus arrest? Is this a sinus arrhythmia? And I would say personally that this is a sinus arrhythmia where it just doesn't really make any sense. Here's our next rhythm. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 15 seconds. Okay, and if we take a look right here, we can see that we have our P waves, they're upright, but they're a little bit abnormal in these different sections right here, right? At the same time, we do have a T wave. It's very obvious where the T wave is, so that's good. It's going to be less than 0.12 seconds, which is good, except for these beats are very abnormal. We have our QRS complex right here, which is less than 0.12 seconds. The P waves that are in the normal type of spacing do match up with the QRS complexes, so we're happy about that. There's only one, and it's upright again. But we have this abnormal beat right here. So I would consider this to be a sinus rhythm, but what type of complex is it? Well, the complex obviously still has a P wave, so it can't be a junctional rhythm. The QRS complex is not wide, it's nice and tight. So I would consider this to be a sinus rhythm with PACs or premature atrial complexes because we can still obviously see the P wave. Here's our next rhythm. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 15 seconds. Okay, and if we take a look right here, we can see that there's one P wave for every QRS complex. It's upright, so it looks good. It's less than 0.12 seconds for the spacing between that and our QRS complex. Our QRS complex is less than 0.12 seconds. It's nice and tight. There's one P wave for every QRS complex. You can see these are obviously T waves. And for the P waves, they match up with the P waves. The QRS complexes match up with the QRS complexes. So we can think, okay, this is a type of sinus rhythm. Now, is it a sinus bradycardia, a sinus rhythm, or a sinus tachycardia? Well, we need to use the box method. So we're going to count the boxes between two R waves here. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7.8 or so boxes, maybe 7.6 boxes, depending on your interpretation. So we're going to do 300 divided by 7.6. That's going to give us a heart rate at approximately 39 to 40 beats per minute. So we're going to think to ourselves, okay, that's going to be sinus bradycardia. So now for this next rhythm, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 15 seconds. Okay, so if we look at this type of rhythm here, we can obviously see that there's no P wave where it would normally be at. We can see our QRS complex is very wide. It's going to be greater than 0.12 seconds. And we can see that the QRS complexes match up with each other. So we're thinking, okay, is this junctional or not? But because it has a wide QRS complex, we're going to think, okay, this is an idioventricular rhythm. What type of idioventricular rhythm? Is it a regular one or is it an accelerated idioventricular rhythm? What we're going to do is we're going to count the red boxes in between. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.2 boxes, maybe even 5.4 boxes, depending on your interpretation. But we'll do 300 divided by, let's meet in the middle, do 5.3. And that's going to give us a heart rate at 56 beats per minute. Now, an idioventricular rhythm is between 20 to 40 beats per minute. A accelerated idioventricular rhythm is going to be between 40 to 100 beats per minute. So this is going to be considered an accelerated idioventricular rhythm. This next one right here, I'll go ahead and give you guys 15 seconds. So if we take a look here, we can see that there's actually multiple P waves at times, right? We can't really visualize the T wave that well. We can see that we have our QRS complex, it's nice and tight, but we have multiple upright P waves. So we can see that the P waves, they don't really match up with the QRS complexes, but they do seem to match up fairly well with each other. There's about 3 in every beat. This one's a little bit lost, but it's still fairly visible. Our QRS complexes match up with each other. So you can see on every beat, they're fairly the same distance. And if we were to turn this rhythm around or turn it to its side and try to cut a tree, we can see that this almost looks like a visible saw blades. So whenever you see something like that, you would think, okay, this is atrial fibrillation. So that's the answer for this rhythm. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tell me how you did in the comments below. I'm really interested. And if you like this type of content, please leave a comment, like, subscribe. It helps a lot with the channel and it shows me that you're interested in more of this type of content. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. See ya.